I ngā mana, i ngā reo, i ngā maunga whakahi. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. E mihi ana ki te mana o te whenua nei. Kei te iwi Mississauga no te awa credit, ki ngā iwi Anashna Bay, Chippewa, Haurashone me Wendat hoki, me ngā uri katoa, tēnā koutou katoa. Kei ngā tini reo me ngā tini mana o te ao Pākihi. Tēnei te mihi mai oha kia koutou katoa i tēnei rā. Nau mai, haere mai, and welcome to the ABAC 2021 Digital Symposium. I'm Rachel Taulale, Chair of the Apec Business Advisory Council for 2021. In those few words of introduction spoken in Te Reo Māori, the Māori language, I simply acknowledge you all, and of course the Indigenous people of Toronto, on whose lands we now meet virtually. It is my great honour to acknowledge the ministers who have kindly joined us today, as well as Janet De Silva, Chair of the Digital Working Group in the APEC Business Advisory Council. And I extend a warm welcome to ABAC members, business people from around the Asia Pacific region, policymakers, academics and others. The APEC Business Advisory Council is the voice of business in APEC. It brings together 3 business leaders from each of APEC's 21 economies. Every year we provide our recommendations to the leaders, ministers and senior officials of the APEC economies. This year ABAC will focus on people, place and prosperity, o tangata, taiao me te taurikura in the Māori language. People are at the heart of this agenda, their future and their well-being. We will come together to discuss how we can achieve inclusion, sustainability and the revival of our region's economic growth, and how we can work together to overcome the challenges of the pandemic. And of course, we need a strong, resilient and dynamic digital economy to underpin our success. To this end, the ABAC Digital Symposium 2021 will showcase some of the digital innovations that we can use to help mitigate COVID-19 in the region and reopen trade and markets. This is an opportunity to share case studies, best practices, and to discuss the government policies needed to harmonise and implement these innovations at scale in all APEC economies. It's now my pleasure to invite Jan De Silva, President and CEO of the Toronto Region Board of Trade and Chair of the ABAC Digital Working Group, to introduce our ministerial panel. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou katoa, and thank you. Jan, over to you.
Thanks, Rachel. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our ABAC Digital Symposium 2021, Accessing Innovation to Reopen APEC Markets and Trade. As mentioned by Rachel, I'm Jan De Silva of ABAC Canada and chair ABAC's Digital Working Group, a group that for years has discussed and amplified the integral role that technology plays in facilitating international trade and economic growth. Over the past year, the pandemic and its impact have been the primary focus of our entire Business Council as we shared information and worked to consider solutions to mitigate the conditions of COVID. Reopening our economies isn't a winner-takes-all race. For the more countries that bring workers and customers back, the faster our connected global marketplace will recover. Deploying and enabling innovative solutions within our economies is key to enabling recovery. What has become clear is the speed and scale at which digital tools are embraced will determine how significant the pandemic's economic blow will be. Digital innovations have gone from nice to have to must have for businesses of all sizes. In fact, global McKinsey surveys report that 5 years worth of tech adoption happened in the first 8 weeks of the pandemic. Economies and sectors more in step with this transition saw a less pronounced downturn, and in some cases, even growth. In other words, digital tools buffered us from an even more devastating economic collapse. Now, as we look ahead to future recovery, there are mixed predictions. On one hand, the IMF forecasts more than 5% growth in global GDP this year. Some of this optimism is, however, predicated on an effective vaccine rollout. Yet, we're facing the spread of new variants that may be more vaccine resistant. So we can't rely solely on vaccines for reopening our markets, economies, and supply chains. Instead, we turn to new solutions, remarkable innovations and advancements that can facilitate economic growth even as the pandemic persists. Over the next 3 days, you'll hear about more than a dozen pilots, projects, and tools currently being deployed around the world. Each solves a different challenge facing our connected economies, be it the digital transformation of small business, to reopening business travel, or digitizing trade and supply chains, or even building infrastructure that delivers multiple wins. At this symposium, you'll have a chance to do more than just listen. Each panel will be followed by breakout rooms where you can speak directly to our experts about their game-changing innovations. You'll be able to join those rooms through the speaker booth feature in the main menu. And these aren't just networking rooms. We hope these are the first step to access and sharing solutions across APEC. After all, APEC was formed more than 4 decades ago on the principle of connection. Growth in one economy can positively impact the others. Likewise, the success of one economy in overcoming the pandemic's limitations can be shared and replicated by others. I want to thank the symposium sponsors, Global Affairs Canada, for recognizing this and enabling these sessions to take place. In fact, government investments, interventions, and policy can clear the way for the private sector to develop and scale successful initiatives. That's why we're so fortunate to kick the symposium off with a special panel of government leaders from APEC economies. Their full bios can be found on our site. So a brief warm welcome before we jump right into our discussion to New Zealand's Minister of Commerce and Consumer Affairs, as well as the Minister for the Digital Economy and Communications, the Honourable Dr. David Clark. Canada's Minister of Small Business, Export Promotion and International Trade, the Honourable Mary Ng. Chile's Minister of Economy, Development and Tourism, the Honourable Lucas Palacios, and Singapore's Minister of Trade and Industry, Chan Chun Sing. Welcome, everyone. Let's get right into questions. Minister Ng, you're tasked with a mandate to grow and diversify Canada's trade partnerships in the midst of a pandemic. With limitations on international travel and global supply chains disrupted, where are you finding those opportunities for Canadian businesses globally? And have your priorities changed relative to where they were pre-pandemic as it comes to trade? Minister?
Well, hi there, Jen, and hello to everybody. It's wonderful to be here with my good colleagues, Minister Clark, Minister Chen, and Minister Palacios. And I'm looking forward to this terrific conversation. And it's wonderful to all the ABAC members who do such important work, your work, helping us on the government side to to complement the good work and the good advice that the private sector provides to us. Certainly, I'm Canada's minister responsible for both small business and export promotion and international trade. I often say my job title is helping our Canadian businesses to start up, scale up, and to access the markets. And yes, here we are in the in a year of this global pandemic. I think that certainly much has changed for us, and I think for all of our economies in the last year. But Canada is certainly a trading nation. 2/3 of our economy and our GDP is accounted for in trade. So through this pandemic, it has been absolutely vital that we have Canada been working with our allies and our friends, certainly through our trading partners. All of us here are signatories to the CPTPP, a really strong trade agreement amongst us, but working to solve for issues like the resilience of supply chains. Certainly in the early days, when Canada and the rest of the world were looking to, import, export PPE, just to bring that into the country to make sure that our people stayed safe, making sure that the resiliency of our food supply chains and food security continue to move through borders. So a range of those issues was what we were working on in the course of the pandemic, and of course. I am also here with Auto Group members, where we as a team, along with other countries who participate in the Auto Group, were tackling some of the issues around restrictions that came up in the course of the pandemic. So a range of issues that we just had to tackle during the pandemic, but at the same time still continuing to stay focused on helping our Canadian businesses pursue that continuity during the pandemic, throughout the pandemic. Dare I also say, to give them the tools that are needed in sort of Team Canada trade as they continue to pursue those opportunities in the external marketplaces, exporting and looking for opportunities through our CPTPP partners is one part, but also, Canada has somewhat, we tout often that we're the only G7 country with a free trade agreement with every other G7 country. So making sure that our apparatus and that our support is in place to help Canada's businesses of all sizes to mitigate and minimize that disruption. But during the course of this pandemic, dare I say, also those that are pivoting and finding new opportunities to support them in that as well. So I suppose the job really hasn't. The outcomes haven't changed. The way in which we're doing them are being modified and challenged, but still staying as much as we can focused on the outcomes that I think Canadian businesses and indeed our partners are expecting of us as well.
Okay. Thanks, Minister. And things indeed have changed. And that bridges really nicely into my next question. Minister Clark, your portfolios interact with the digital economy and small business. These are two worlds that were first forced to merge much faster than anyone anticipated due to the pandemic. Our panel tomorrow will speak to how businesses are making the transition towards digital trade and e-commerce. But what can government do to make that transition happen smoothly and rapidly?
We've had a program which has been very successful for us, which we've called a Digital Boost program, which has been available to small businesses through online courses and services to ensure that they have the digital tools to trade more widely. And what we found is that a number of our small businesses don't have a digital presence and don't have some of the skills which they could be leveraging to promote their businesses. During our lockdown, which happened about a year ago now, which was not for as long, obviously, as many other countries have experienced, we saw that transformation happen, that McKinsey figure that you quoted, Jan, at the beginning, where so much transformation happened in such a short period of time. Part of our challenge has been to make the most of that awakening that businesses had before they revert back to business as usual, because we have had COVID-free communities. Many of our businesses are tempted to go back to the way things were. But I think many can also see the opportunity. So we have had, in the short time that program's been operating since the end of December, thousands of businesses already take that opportunity up. And we're aiming to have 20% of our businesses interact with that program by the middle of this year.
Yeah. Yes, and therein lies the challenge for us all, is how do we stay the course on helping our small businesses digitize and know that this is part of the business model they're going to have in the future. Minister Palacios, Chile's Agency for Promoting Foreign Investment is under your oversight. In a time of uncertainty about the future flow of international investment, what are you doing differently now from what you were focused on before the pandemic to attract employment-intensive investments to your country?
Well, thank you, Jan, for inviting me to this symposium, and thank you to all my colleagues. As you all mentioned, in Chile, the National Agency for the Promotion of Foreign Investment, called Invest Chile, is under the oversight of the Ministry of Economy, Tourism and Development. So is the Sustainable Project Management Office, Oficina GPS in España, GPS, in charge of monitoring investment projects in process. So to answer your question, before the pandemic, our work was more focused on bringing new foreign investment to our country. Our focus was on promoting Chile and the many investment opportunities it presents on different sectors: tourism, mining, agriculture, technology, green hydrogen, among others. The contingency forced us to adapt our work and focus on supporting foreign companies already present in Chile, to avoid stopping their projects and amid restrictions due to the pandemic. The above without neglecting the international promotion that took place remotely throughout the year, including the annual international seminar held in November and the first version of the Elige Chile, Choose Chile, seminar held in January, past January, with focus on the opportunities Chile offers in renewable energies, infrastructure investment, and new technologies. So in terms of numbers, during last year, we organized and took part in 83 activities of promotion and attraction of investment focused in 23 countries. We also provided 1,205 services to foreign companies, and for the first time, 90% of them were done through e-consulting. As we have achieved great results, despite the pandemic scenario, the amount of investment for the next 5 years associated with investment projects greater than $100 million, which are monitored by Oficina GPS, as I mentioned, increased from 63 billion in December 2019 to 72 billion at the end of last year. So we grew 14%. Meanwhile, the number of projects in different stages of development that are part of the portfolio also rose compared to the previous year's result. In 2020, closed with 234 projects compared to 204 initiatives in 1990, which meant growth of almost 15%. To a large extent, this is due to the fact that the flow of new projects has been maintained. During the past year, 40 projects extended in the portfolio, corresponding to a bit more than 11 billion of investment during the next 5 years. How did it happen? The explanation resides on Chile's potential for new businesses. Sectors as food tech, energy, and technology, which has been fundamental during the pandemic, found in Chile a perfect partner for the development of new projects. So all this pandemic has also meant opportunities for our country. This has been especially remarkable in the technology business, where we are now positioned as a digital hub for Latin America. Companies as big as Microsoft, Google, AWS, Oracle, among others, are developing projects and data centers in Chile. We will have in the next 5-year investment for more than $4,500 billion by world-class technology companies. We are very happy with these results, and that foreign companies continue to choose Chile to carry out their projects, since foreign investment will be crucial for the recovery of our economy and the creation of jobs in a post-pandemic scenario, which is very different than the scenario we had before. Another thing that will be crucial to attract investment is that we are doing great in the vaccination process. According to information of our World in Data, in the last 7 days, Chile was the country that administered more vaccines per 100 people in the world. And nowadays, we have more than 22% of the population with at least one dose of the vaccine. Therefore, Chile will be one of the first economies to be a full throttle after the pandemic, and I'm convinced that investors will be attracted by this capacity of Chile to get over the crisis, as well as a good country to visit. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And reopening travel is one of the topics of our discussion tomorrow. So I do hope we can visit it sometime soon. But I did want to congratulate you. It seems like an incredibly smart strategy to focus on how do you work with the foreign companies that are already in Chile and help them expand projects. So I hope we'll have some time to come back to that through our discussion tonight. Minister Chan, last year your government committed nearly 20% of the nation's GDP to measures mitigating COVID's impact, including 18 times the number of grants for business than 2019. How do you decide where to target that support between different sectors or programs? And what are the early results of these investments?
Thank you, Jen, and thank you for inviting us to join in this fireside chat. So first, let me start off by saying that never waste a crisis. Never waste a crisis. So you mentioned about the huge amount of budget that we spent last year. Yes, we are fortunate to have our forefathers left us with a sizable reserve that we can draw on for a rainy day like this. But I think more than just counting the budget, we want to make sure that the budget counts. So to your question as to how we prioritize the spending, we started with this the following assumptions. First, the assumption that we made was that we're not going back to a pre-COVID world. So there's no point trying to defend the status quo or to hope that we will go back to a pre-COVID world, because the world has moved on. And the world has moved on because COVID has, in some sense, accentuated and in other sense, accelerated existing trends that were already ongoing. And I'll just list some of these trends, which then guided us on how we supported our enterprises and the training of our workers to prepare for a post-COVID world, or having to learn to live in a COVID world for a prolonged time. So I think the first shift that we have seen even prior to this is that the level of uncertainty, the level of geopolitical uncertainty has increased over time, and it will likely to be sustained for quite a while. So we want to be a safe harbor in terms of policy. We want to be a safe harbor for talent, capital, and intellectual property. We know that the technological disruption is also going to accelerate. So instead of resisting them, as you have mentioned, we're going to seize the opportunity to help our businesses and workers to embrace the digital revolution and accelerate the change. For a small country like Singapore, the digital revolution is a blessing because it allows us to transcend the size of our geography and the distances. I mean, today's fireside chat is a good example. We are never constrained by the size of our economy or the distances that separate us, but instead we are united by a set of values. We are united by platforms and standards that allows us to trade even across vast distances from literally four corners of the world. So to us, it's a tremendous opportunity that we have every intention to seize. Then there are also other trends that have been accelerated, which we must embrace and help our companies to seize those new opportunities. This includes the greater emphasis on the resilience of supply chains and the issues related to sustainability. So we're going to make a big push to have our economy go green, and yet at the same time to grow the green economy, whereby there are many new opportunities on sustainable solutions, urban management, and so forth. And we think that as a small, compact, and densely populated society, if we can manage some of these environmental challenges, then we can provide solutions for the rest of the world, which we can then export and share with the rest of the world as well. So yet another trend that has emerged even prior to COVID is that because of the unequal distribution of the benefits of trade and globalization, many countries have seen heightened protectionist sentiments within their domestic population. And we have to work to resist this, and we have to work with like-minded partners like those around the fireside chat tonight to say that we stand for open trade, and even through the depth of a pandemic, we will resist the temptation to close our borders, and instead we will make an attempt to continue to strengthening our ties. I think our relationship with New Zealand is a great example. Through the depth of the crisis, I think there was the heightened awareness of the mutual interdependence between the two. And for Singapore, we made a commitment to make sure that the trade routes to New Zealand through Singapore will never be disrupted. And likewise, I think that is how we have also strengthened cooperation with Chile and New Zealand to embrace the digital economy by having a Pathfinder Digital Economy Partnership Agreement. And again, it is a tremendous opportunity for the three of us to work together across vast oceans and distances, and that have created new opportunities for our businesses. So I would say that the initial results are promising. Notwithstanding the pandemic last year, we attracted a record haul of foreign direct investment into Singapore, and the pipeline continues to be strong. And that's because I think even in a crisis, perhaps all the more in a crisis, people are looking for places where they can mobilize their capital, aggregate their talent, and protect their intellectual property. And for small or smaller economies like us, if we can get some of these fundamentals right, we will continue to be able to move nimbly, perhaps even much faster than some of the bigger economies that compete on the basis of size or price. But for us as a smaller economies, I think we always have to compete on the basis of quality and speed.
Mm-hmm. And I think you're raising really important points here, really, that it's about the opportunity that collaboration provides for us to level the playing field, and also the opportunity that digitization provides to, again, level the playing field from small businesses or small markets to the larger markets. So really important themes that we're trying to address as well within ABAC, the Business Council, and our digital working group. As I said in my opening, and this is a question for all of our ministers, we can't wait for vaccine deployment to support the reopening of our economies, our markets, and our trade routes. So beyond financial aid, what levers do you see being available to support economic activity in the short term? Minister Ng, could you kickstart us with a response?
Yeah, absolutely, and I couldn't agree with with my colleagues who just spoke earlier. I think that there really is an opportunity for us to on the one hand, the collaboration among like us who are here, but domestically, to make sure that we are equipping our our own businesses with the range of supports and tools, government having a part, but that really sort of helps the private sector sort of do its part. So in Canada, as an example, it really is important, and this sort of started even before COVID-19, just to give you a sense of size and scope. I mean, Canada has a big geography mass. So, so very similar to Singapore in one respect. Like we're small, like we're like we're 38 million people, but that there's 13 Chiles in Canada. There's 37 New Zealands in Canada in terms of our geography. So for us, it is really making sure, and we started this work some while ago, which is to connect our country, right? I mean, connect our country with broadband in our rural communities, our remote communities, and our northern companies, because our country is so vast geographically that we need to make those right investments. And some of those themes are very similar, right? It's investing in your people, it's investing in that training, it's investing in the technology and the digital capabilities so that we can indeed compete. We were already well on this track, but certainly the pandemic has absolutely accelerated it. The very fact that we have all of us on different sort of, in different, vast, sort of global locations, and to be able to do this, and indeed to have collaborated. And I fully expect that we will continue to collaborate going forward. So I think it's really important. Certainly, Canada takes the position that in the recovery, the benefits of trade have to accrue to all of our people. So it means small businesses, micro and small businesses. It means women-owned entrepreneurs. Chile and Canada, work through a really terrific, inclusive and gender, initiative together. It's making sure that our Indigenous people and racialized businesses, new immigrant businesses, also continue to have a leg up. So much of our work is making sure that our investments, and certainly in the investments in terms of beyond, sort of on that road back from COVID-19, it is building back better. It is not building to COVID-19. Where we may build back to COVID-19 is that we want to make sure that we seize the number of employment back to pre-pandemic levels. So in that respect, we have numbers that are that compare to COVID-19. But in terms of building back better, absolutely. I mean, sustainability and a greater green, sort of green economy in this country, and to be able to collaborate with the partners who are here. We are already doing that in the digital space, in the inclusive space, and certainly in the green growth space. I mean, if I just sort of tout one example, I mean, a great carbon capture company in Canada that's operating and building it is the clean, cement capture solution for an infrastructure project in Singapore. Like, these are the kinds of opportunities that I really see us having an opportunity while we support our domestic businesses and industries. But being able to facilitate, as we are as government leaders, I often sort of say we set the table so that the private sector and the businesses are able to come to the table and start making some really great meals together. And that's what our trade agreements are about. That's what our investments are about. And that is where our collaboration's about in terms of the resiliency of supply chains, keeping our trade restrictions, like just not having them, and making a commitment and working together to do that as good trading partners is what our work has been and will continue to be.
Thank you, Minister. And Minister Clark, over to you.
Yeah, Minister, I couldn't agree more with many of the things that you've talked about the importance of inclusivity and that growth. And for us as a small island nation, 37 New Zealand's in Canada. That's not a statistic I've heard before, but it sounds right. We have the challenge of being a long way from markets, and that's meant for us that we have to think carefully about not only our climate change impact, but the cost of sending our goods a long way. And so the opportunity with digital in terms of trade is one where there's a much more level playing field for us. And so the opportunity and benefits are even greater again compared to our other options. So we're looking at the ways in which technology can support our big industries like agriculture, how we adapt to a new world where tourism is different to what it was before, because that's one of our big export earners. But then also how we look to transform the technology sector. And so we're developing plans, and I have to say one of the areas I've looked is at the Singaporean digital strategy, which I find quite inspiring in terms of what's being looked to there in terms of the potential for Singapore. And I'm looking at different examples around the world and looking at how we can map our own path out. We've had some really good success with the rollout of fibre, some of those basic enablers for our economy, and we know now that our speeds, I think, are amongst the top 3 in the OECD, and that's really great because we were at the back of the pack, and the program of rollout there has brought us up to the front in terms of accessibility of broadband and fibre speeds. But then what comes next is for us the question, and we don't have the benefit of a dense population. I see Singapore aiming to, I think it's 50% of phone users able to connect to 5G by the end of next year. There are other countries moving ahead very rapidly with new technology adoption, and for us, we have to look to what comes next so that the advantages that we're looking to accrue are ones that we continue to build on so that we can be open to those export opportunities through globally connected markets in the digital space. We pride ourselves on our reputation of developing technologies and adopting technologies early. But as things accelerate in terms of the types of big data that can be processed and so on, we're going to need to continue to expand our infrastructure and also make sure that we have a clear plan in the way that Singapore does. And in the way that other countries do as well. And so that's what I'm very much focused on from the government side. And from the business side, looking to make sure that we're collaborating with our businesses in the development of that plan. So we have an industry transformation plan that's being developed that is done in collaboration with business. And that's really exciting. That will go through our cabinet. That will have the blessing at the top level, so that our businesses have that confidence in that plan. And to finish where I began, in terms of inclusivity of that growth, we're also looking to make sure that our Indigenous people are involved in that digital planning right from the beginning. The strategy that I'm working on as a minister, we're looking right at the beginning of that process to make sure our Māori are consulted, are having input into the way we shape our digital future, because we know that if we consult early in that process, we get better outcomes and make sure that we're making the best of all of the skills that are there at our disposal in our economy.
Thank you, Minister Clark. Minister Palacios.
Okay, beyond financial aid, right? Well, we know that vaccine deployment is not enough for economic activity, and we are having also both expansive fiscal and monetary policies, which mean it's financial aid. But more than that, we are following strategies. The constitution, first of all, of a work table with union organizations in order to facilitate the implementation of the government measures. This for us is very important in order to bring information and to get information from them, to coordinate. We have also included the reduction of deadlines for state responses to SMEs and investors. The teams of professionals from the respective ministries will be strengthened, seeking to shorten response times to companies to facilitate reactivation. We're also allowing our regulatory framework to temporarily introduce time and function adjustments so that workers can adapt to work in compliance with the new health regulations. To protect their health, give them safety and respect minimum physical distancing criteria within the framework of the recommendations made by our Ministry of Health. So we have developed protocols for each industry. We are implementing a digitalization plan with focus on SMEs, creating platforms to promote the digital transformation of SMEs, increase the visibility of different businesses, the detail of their offer and their sales channels, training courses that seeks to improve the skills and competitiveness of MSMEs in digital matters, among others. We digitalized almost 1/4 of all the companies in Chile last year. In addition, we consolidated the portal, Your Company in 1 Day. This is an easy and a simple way to create a company in only 1 day. So with this, we can face the informality, which is very important for us. In 1 day, here in Chile now, you can create a company. It is also very important to mention the efforts that we are doing to promote the regional digital market in order to generate greater digital integration to the Pacific Alliance, a regional bloc composed also by Colombia, Mexico, and Peru. Today, the regional digital market has been defined into a strategy that seeks to enable the free flow of digital products, goods, and services that are marketed through the internet and capital linked to the digital market among the members of countries of the alliance. Such strategy will be put into value this year, and it is estimated that it could generate an additional value of more than 15 billion in 5 years. All of these non-financial initiatives aim to support our economic activity, and we are confident that they will help us achieve this goal while we contain the pandemic through the vaccination campaign.
Thank you. And Minister Chan.
If I may just make my remarks on 2 sets of issues that you have raised. One has to do with the vaccine, and the second has to do with the opportunities in the digital space. Let me start with the vaccine first. I think our working assumption must be that the vaccine is not a panacea to solve all the problems and get us back to the pre-COVID world or get us out of the COVID world. There's still a lot of uncertainties associated with the rollout of vaccines across the world, and realistically, it won't be done for perhaps the next 1-2 years. The second is, I think there's also a great danger that the virus continue to mutate and the efficacy of the vaccine will be questioned. So having said that, I think our assumption must be that we must work on the basis that we might be in a COVID world for quite a long while, and we must make all our plans on that basis, that even if the vaccine rollout is slowed down, it's not as good as it is, we must still be able to operate. So I think from that perspective, Singapore is operating on that assumption that we must be able to reconnect with the rest of the world, even in a COVID world, and we make the necessary plans based on that, which means that we need new protocols to receive and accept visitors. We must have new protocols to make sure that community cases in our society is kept to the lowest possible. And that's exactly what we have done. And we have to pilot new ways for people to connect through Singapore, connect at Singapore, even though they may not be able to connect bilaterally. And that's why we are piloting various initiatives like Connect at Singapore, where people can come to Singapore, have a safe meeting place without necessary quarantine measures that would eat up 14 days of their precious time. Yeah. So we'll continue to do that even as we host large-scale forums like the World Economic Forum, where thousands of people from all across the world can come to Singapore and meet safely. Now, on the other part, let me move to my second point about the digital cooperation, which is really the theme of tonight's fireside chat. I think that we need to look at this at different levels and how different parts of the system come together. We can look at it from the government level, the business level, and the people's level. I think at the government level, there's two responsibilities for all governments. One is to make sure the digital infrastructure is in place. And to this end, I guess, Singapore being the smallest country amongst all four, don't have to compete with us. We are definitely the smallest by size and by land area. But that is a blessing in disguise because that allows us to roll out the technology much faster and it's actually much more cost effective, especially for the 5G infrastructure, which technically, you need double the number of stations, the base stations, to cover the same area. So that's a great advantage for Singapore. But the other thing that the government needs to do well is to make sure that we continue to work with like-minded partners to resist the tide of digital protectionism. Because without that, we will never be able to fully grasp the full potential of the digital integration for the global economy. So we're very happy to have New Zealand and Chile partner us in the Digital Economic Partnership Agreement, a Pathfinder Agreement. We hope that Mary, you will join us as well. And one of these days, and this is an open invitation on behalf of us. I'm not sure whether I'm speaking often on behalf of David and Lucas, but if one day Canada would like to join us, I think we'll be happy to embrace Canada because this is the kind of international partnership that we need to really allow our small and medium enterprises to seize the opportunities. Now, that's what the government can do, but I think that perhaps is still the easier part. The more challenging part is how do we get our enterprises, big and small, to embrace the digital revolution? I think today everybody talks about the digital potential. Everybody thinks that digitalization is the solution, but sometimes we joke that we don't understand what's the problem. But digitalization is the solution. And I think from our experience, there are different forms of digitalization for enterprises. The most basic being people digitalize their current processes, which is not bad. It helps to improve the efficiencies, productivity, and so forth. But the real challenge for many enterprises is how do they access platforms as a service to help them to evolve at speed? How do they use the digital tools to reshape their new business model and explore new opportunities? And therein lies the larger potential of the digital revolution for our small and medium enterprises. So like today, I kept telling my small and medium enterprises that what we call the SMEs to stop calling themselves the SMEs. They should call themselves the Singapore multinational, the Singapore MNCs emerging SMEs, because I want them to have a perspective that they don't just serve the Singapore market, but they have, through the digital means, the ability to serve the global markets. Now, this mindset change for us is the most challenging for all the small and medium enterprises because it is about a change in perspective that's required before the adoption of technology. Otherwise, the adoption of technology is just trying to digitalize current processes, which will give them a leg up to a certain extent, but not beyond. Last but not least, that has to do with the role of digitalization access for the workers. And this is an important theme because when we talk about inclusion, when we talk about the resistance to globalization and trade, it is often because the middle income, the lower income are unable to keep pace with the disruption that comes with globalization and digitalization. And this is why in Singapore, we want to spend an inordinate amount of resources to help our people level up. And we are not just talking about the new generations coming through the school system. In fact, that is quite easily done. What is perhaps more difficult for all of us are the matured workers who have left the school system 20 or 30 years ago. How do we maintain the currency of their skills and yet for them to pick up new skills to be able to keep pace with the digital needs of the global economy? So this is where we are going to invest our resources to move from compulsory education in the early years into continuing education for the rest of the lifetime of our workers. And I think if we can do this well, then we will have less pressures politically to resist trade, to fragment trade or to resist the integration of the global economy. And then we can truly realize the potential of having more economies better integrated as one so that we can all realize our relative competitive advantage.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Minister Chan. We're going to have time for one more question, and I can go one of two directions. I think the whole development of our how do we digitally upskill, that's going to be a big theme of discussion coming tomorrow evening. So what I'd like to do is something that's very top of mind for our Business Advisory Council. And that is about the whole area of how do we create a level playing field through interoperability or harmonizing our platforms across our markets. Like over the next couple of days, we're going to be hearing about some great innovations and projects that ideally we can export and scale across all of our economies. However, regulations often get in the way of that. And just as the pandemic has forced businesses to digitize, there has to be increasing pressure on our countries and our nations to be able to get our regulations in shape to permit that digitization at a minimum at home, but more ideally across our trading partnerships. So my final question to our ministers is how can we better align our regulations with each other to be more agile and collaborative? This is not about harmonization per se. There are some nuances that each of our nations would need to address. It's more interoperability. Does this require new forms of agreements like have been mentioned? So let me start with Minister Clark.
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head there in terms of the partnerships and the agreements, and Minister Chan referred to the deeper partnership. And I believe Canada has expressed interest in joining. So
yes, we have. We've expressed interest. So stay tuned.
Welcome in advance,
Minister Ng, I have a pen with me today, so we could pass that around.
And Minister Palacios, obviously Chile is already a part of that, a partner in that as well. So I think that opens up the opportunity for the conversation. But there is the challenge for us all to get our own regulatory systems up to date to ensure that our own populations have trust in the technology. And so a focus of my work in New Zealand is with my colleagues working out how we can build that trust through having frameworks, accreditation and so forth, so that those who are using the internet, those who are engaging digitally, can be confident that they are not going to be the victims of fraud or misrepresentation, that there are appellate bodies for people to go to when things are not right online, but also that the systems are in place that people can trust. For me, it comes back a lot to trust. And I think the onus is on all of us in this room, business leaders included, to make sure that we are having conversations with our international partners, that we are constantly encouraging our officials to engage as regulatory regimes are developed so that they are in harmony. so that it's easiest to get that stuff right at the start rather than trying to retrofit it. So I think the onus is on all of us to continue to beat that drum, to make sure that we are looking to make future trading opportunities as easy as possible, because we all want to trade and we all recognise the opportunity for our economies in that.
Thank you, Minister Clark. Minister Palacios.
Well, during the pandemic, we have had the opportunity to learn from other countries, other experiences. I think now we are facing with this new era of digitalization nearly the same. We must acknowledge what we have learned, and we need to have special focus about other situations, digitalization in Chile. We are a very long country with different situations, different costumes. And digitalization has helped us to integrate territories, to communicate each other. We are now developing 5G, for example, in Chile, and this will promote this integration. And I think we have a tremendous, and I think APEC can help task for the future in order to learn how to communicate each other as a world. With this new digital world that we are facing. Maybe this last month have accelerated the process. And I think it's good. Every time in the history that we have faced difficulties, it's also an opportunity. And I think we have now the opportunity to have this new language, digital language, and in order to help each other and help us to face new urgencies, new things like the pandemic altogether.
Thank you very much. Minister Chan, your thoughts. I know you've touched on this in your previous remarks.
I think that is a new concept that we need to embrace. And we have always said this in Singapore, that beyond physical connectivity and financial and data connectivity, we also need regulatory connectivity, where we have the same standards. The nice thing about the digital economy is that, just like the DIPA, it is you can be done in a modular structure, such that we don't have to agree on everything before we move on anything, but we can build on it block by block. And I think one of the useful processes that we have found is to talk to our business community and to find out from them which are the modular blocks that they want first, so that we can act on it across the borders. And from our experience, I think we have about 4 or 5 modules that are quite basic to the business interests, which they would like to do first, which they would like to prioritize. And that is the connectivity for the e-commerce platforms for us to trade across the different parts of the world. Mm-hmm. The second is about the electronic bill of lading, lading, because when you trade across border, if we can connect our system so that we don't have to keep filling up forms, and we can transmit the data electronically, even to the next port of call, even before the physical goods arrive, that will be a tremendous help to our businesses. The third has to do with intellectual property recognition, mutual recognition, so that they don't have to keep filing forms and applying for recognition across different jurisdictions. The fourth has to do with payment, electronic payments, and that has to go back to what David mentioned about the issue of trust, which then comes to the fifth issue, which is what we call KYC, know your client, know your customer. Mm-hmm. How do we have that module embedded across our economy for the benefit of not just the consumer, but also the businesses? And it's especially important when it comes to trade financing and loans. So these are some of the basic modules that we can work together quickly to promote that regulatory connectivity that's so essential for us to realize the potential in the digital world.
Thank you. Minister Ng, all the pressure's been on you.
Well, thank you for this. And I'll pick up where my colleagues left off as well. It is the work of both domestically, on the one hand, of getting sort of our house and making sure we're sort of building the house in a way that will help our businesses enter into the international trade in a much, much more digital way. And at the same time, time to be working on those very common rules, if you will, common platform, common rules with our like-minded partners. So, so in Canada, for example, we've introduced the digital charter. The digital charter is updating our privacy laws for the digital age. It is it is rules around around how to measure sort of the value of data, and how to make sure that that the IP structures here in Canada are serving our Canadian businesses, in particular those in in the new knowledge economy that in Canada sort of sit complementary to some of our very traditional industries, whether they be in agriculture, in forestry, or in energy and so forth. So really making sure that we have sort of privacy laws for the digital age, IP strategies that protects our innovators and our businesses, making sure that our own regulations, have the coherency that it needs to, and I think one of my colleagues mentioned this before, which is how do we help our businesses see themselves as global businesses right here, resident in Canada, despite the fact that they too call themselves SMEs, right? But how do they see themselves as global businesses right from the get-go, or in their growth, in their very, very early stages of growth, or certainly if they're mature businesses in that growth into sort of into the digital world. And at the same time, I fully agree with what Minister Chan said. Trade facilitation and those rules, how you deal with payments across our various our various jurisdictions, and how that settlement will necessarily work. So we have, like, the encouraging thing is that we actually all here all work together, whether it is through, whether it's bilateral or multilateral, like, the four of us, but through other modalities as well. Through the WTO, there is active work taking place on e-commerce negotiations that we hope will codify some of this, not only for our countries, but literally for the world trading system. So there is much work to be done, and I couldn't agree more. We need to do this with businesses. Jan, you and I talk all the time. You're the head of our our board of trade for our our largest metropolis in the country. So being ear to the ground with our businesses, so that we are being responsive in how we deal with our internal domestic regulations and rules and supports in a way that actually builds their capability to trade, to operate and to trade more increasingly in the digital economy is where all of our challenges on the one hand, but certainly where all of our opportunity is. And I do really think that all of us working on this and getting it right means that road to prosperity for our people is that much accelerated or better, and certainly build back better, I think is what we're all aiming to do.
Well, ministers, I cannot thank you enough. You were the perfect start to our symposium today. Clearly, the themes we're pulling away are the opportunity that this digital world is creating to level the playing field for businesses of all sizes, for markets of all sizes. But that's only going to be realized through collaboration to help businesses get on that digital journey, and collaboration among our markets. So this ends the symposium's first day. Tomorrow's program includes 2 of our 4 panels of discussion. Tiao Le Lim of ABAC Singapore will moderate the first session on reopening global business travel, and Anna Curzon of ABAC New Zealand will moderate the second, that explores the programs and resources that are helping micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises transition into a digital economy. These are success stories that offer transferable solutions to everyone. So until tomorrow, thank you all for joining us, and be well.